Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is really Slav, interview Chiki Briki. So, this is Squatting Slav TV. He lives in Canada, Vancouver, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, I've seen your videos on the Squatting Slav TV YouTube channel. So, you basically go and debate the anti-Trump protests in Canada and anti-Trump protesters. So, can you please tell me what gave who or what gave you an idea to do what you're doing and to make YouTube videos?
Of course. So in the last probably 3 or 4 months here in Vancouver, Canada, we've had maybe five Donald Trump protests. Some that happened before the inauguration, during the election process, some after he got elected. And basically, I wanted to go check these out, to talk to some of these protesters, to see what they knew, what they were all about, what they were protesting. So I casually went down one day. The first video I filmed, I believe, was actually exactly 2 months ago today, on the 7th of February. I went to a sort of a mini Trump protest to ask them some questions. And I was actually very shocked, by these SJWs who had no clue about what they were protesting. The first one I went to was about the Muslim travel ban, and I was shocked that, none of them knew even what countries were on the travel ban, what the travel ban implied. They were just there sort of making noise, holding up all kinds of signs, obviously, with all kinds of different hair colors, this and that, typical SJWs doing typical SJW shit. And very shortly, after I started asking them questions, they made a public announcement at this protest stating that I was affiliated with all these right-wing media groups, and they essentially advised everyone not to engage with me, not to speak with me. So very quickly on, I got censored out, blocked out, and no one wanted to speak to me. But I still managed to get some good interviews with them, and the goal basically from the start was to expose them for who they are, which is basically people with no factual knowledge, people who are just there for the hype, to be in the midst of anything without any kind of real knowledge.
Yeah, and it actually boggles my mind. Well, you live in Canada, and Trump is the United States president. So sorry, why the fuck do they protest a U.S. president in Canada?
Yes, well, you'd think these people would have something better to do than protest a president who doesn't even represent their country, a politician who doesn't even represent their country. So that's why it's quite pathetic. I mean, we have our own domestic issues here in Canada, of course, and issues that hit close to home, and no one is out protesting these issues. But of course, they're jumping on Trump's back, calling him a racist, criticizing this and that. When we've got these problems in our own backyard.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, have you ever been accused of being like a Kremlin troll on you being on Putin's payroll or something like that?
Well, I haven't been accused, of being a Kremlin troll, but you can actually see in one of my videos, one of the protesters I speak to openly says that he's terrified of my Russian accent. And I'm not even Russian, I'm Serbian. So he's scared of my accent. He says he's worried. He thinks I'm one of Putin's people. So the irony is, it's a very ironic that these people are protesting, racism, this and that, but then they're terrified of, Slavs like me and you.
Yeah, yeah. Sure, I'm sure they are. So, you as a you're probably you're a Canadian citizen or not?
Yes, Canadian citizen.
Okay, so what can you say about the current Canadian government and current Prime Minister Justin Trudeau?
Well, I think that most Canadians will agree with me when I say that Justin Trudeau is a clown and a complete joke. He's not running the country. He's basically just taking selfies every single day with visible minorities, and basically just pushing the globalist agenda that people above him are placing down on him. So uh, people elected Justin Trudeau 2 years ago now, thinking that he would bring some kind of change because he was young. But unfortunately, he's proven to be nothing than a clown and a complete virtue signaler at the end of the day, far from a politician.
Yeah, when I saw his video, why in his 50-50, why men and women are 50-50 in his cabinet, and he said because it's 2050. You see, man, because this is their view, this is how they envision progress. I mean, yeah, you must be progressive, therefore you must like show women and minorities everywhere, completely disregard their merit or something. Well, because they're women, because they're black people, because they're Muslims, because they're blah 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 blah. I think it's just wrong. It's not progressive in any I think it's actually the opposite. It's regressive.
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely believe in equality for everyone, but when you're constantly pushing these groups to the forefront of things and putting all the attention on them, it actually makes it seem like they're the victims and they're the ones that need saving, right? So it's not very progressive. It's actually regressive, and that's
Yeah.
why the term the regressive left, has become so popular because everything they're doing now is pushing them back, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you see, I think people are back again in this left-right paradigm, which I think it's a little bit false, but this is a subject for a different story, different video. But with where are you exactly on the political spectrum? Left, right, center?
I'm definitely right leaning. I will openly say that. I mean, I understand when you see, some conflicts between left, right, this and that, right? But I'm definitely more right leaning, and I will admit, 5 6 years ago, I was definitely, more left leaning. But as I began to read more, educate myself more on, geopolitics, politics, philosophy, I definitely started going more towards the right, and just noticing the actions of what I say is the left or the regressive left recently is just making me sort of bounce back at all of that and lean more and more right.
Yeah, well, speaking of geopolitics, I am myself actually follow Alexander Dugin in geopolitics, and I think he has a lot of sense and he speaks actually more truth than others. So basically, in Dugin's words, you see, there is this misconception about Alexander Dugin that some people view him as a fascist, but other people who are far, far, far right, they view him as a disguised communist. Well, he's neither of that.
Hmm.
And well, basically, Alexander Dugin and his idea of Eurasianism, as opposed to Western like liberal hegemony Atlanticism, is a very good idea. I'm actually myself consider myself a Eurasianist, and I follow Dugin. So I believe that in this war, the Eurasianism will win.
Definitely, no, definitely. I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see, how the balance of power and global hegemony sort of in which direction it heads in the very near future with everything that we see going on in Syria right now. The world is becoming more and more polarized, over Syria. So we have, of course, the West, and then we have, Russia, the allies on the other side. So basically, Syria has created like this whirlpool that's sucking everyone in, from both sides. And it will be actually extremely interesting to see, where things end up. You know,
Yeah.
things are happening on a daily basis now. Within the next month, things could change. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we will be back to that subject later. I would also like to ask you about these protests because I see your video that I see your videos and they are relatively peaceful. So have you ever experienced like any like sort of vitriol or violence against you? Didn't people try to attack you with their fists or with mace?
Hmm.
Because I saw people like Lauren Southern. Well, actually, I like her. She's very pretty. Like people like Lauren Southern getting attacked by these violent, like Antifa left wing people.
Yeah, well, I live in Canada, and Lauren Southern, I believe she's on the other side of Canada in Toronto now as well. Antifa in Canada is generally very peaceful. They don't have too many members here. Antifa, if you're listening to this, listen up. So they don't have too many members in Canada, and I've gone to a few of their protests so far. They'll intimidate you. They'll have 4 or 5 guys circle you, but they'll never actually physically harm you or anything. Now, also, I am, almost 2 meters tall, so maybe that is a little bit of a deterrent.
Yeah.
Uh, but they are, they do get very violent, as we've seen, in UC Berkeley in the States, in California. They looted, they assaulted people, maced people, burned down cars and property. So they're much more violent in the U.S. and in Toronto. Well, recently at the protest, they did get violent as well. So, I mean, it really depends on, how many of them there are at the protest. If there's just a few, they won't touch you. But, if there's hordes of them, then then they'll grow some balls and try to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so the so we as a Slavs should also focus on some Slav issues. So, what is your opinion on what Ukraine should do, and what is your opinion with the whole thing? Because you see, the Western propaganda is constantly, like blaming Russia. They always play this blame Russia game. I think they actually have some sort of button in their TV studios which is written "blame Russia" on it, and they push it, and
Mm-hmm.
absolutely automatically is evil. Oh, evil Russia, evil Putin is trying to conquer Ukraine, and he annexed Crimea. No,
Mm-hmm.
Russia didn't invade Crimea. Crimea left through peaceful referendum, and although I admit that those green men without insignia were actually Russian troops, but not a shot was not a single bullet. No one died.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an invasion. An invasion is something what the U.S. did in Iraq and what they do in Afghanistan. That's an invasion. But what Russia did in Crimea, I don't think it's count as an invasion.
No, no, of course not. And I mean, I personally believe that that Crimea is Russian, and I will always stand by that. And right now, as you're mentioning, anti-Russian propaganda in the West is at an all-time high. There's not one day where I don't turn on CNN, to see some kind of anti-Russian propaganda, whether it's to do with Russians hacking the elections,
Oh, that
Putin,
bullshit.
all the bullshit, right? Putin doing this and that, or even the terrorist attack that happened just a few days ago in St. Petersburg. There was absolutely no mention of this, or very little mention of this on CNN. There were no European buildings lit up in colorful lights, no Russian flag filters on Facebook. So Russian propaganda once again is at an all-time high. Russia is being demonized. And with all of this happening, obviously the whole situation in Ukraine is kind of being shoved under the rug. And I believe with Ukraine from day one, Russia was being blamed as an aggressor. Where personally, I mean, I always saw this as a Soros-funded color revolution, basically, right? Where
Yeah.
you had the West infiltrating Ukraine and setting up all these violent demonstrations and protests, and of course blaming it on the Russians later. And I mean, sadly, this is something that we're seeing more and more now all over the world. These little revolutions popping up, and particularly I'll mention with Ukraine, as NATO continues to spread their bases around the world, and their expansionism pushes further and further east, they are very pressured to isolate Russia, and the only way to do this, obviously, is to get closer and closer in and establish their bases in Ukraine. So this is just NATO expansionism moving eastbound, and geopolitics, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, well, people are now more and more people I see that seeing like start to say things like that. Oh, we have more. more things to worry about than Ukraine. This is Russian backyard. Let Russia deal with this. But
Hmm.
well, but the neocons, they just won't stop. I mean, neocons like John McCain, Sarah Palin, and some Democrats like Zbigniew Brzezinski,
Hmm.
they just they just can't get their heads out of their assholes that the Cold War is over and Soviet Union is no more, and Russia is just another country who just wants its interests to be respected.
Absolutely. Well, the neocons, their main goal obviously is to expand the military-industrial complex. So obviously, I guess the wars in the Middle East aren't enough for them, so they have to be starting these proxy conflicts everywhere else, Russia included. And with what we've seen, yesterday with the attacks on Syria, I wouldn't be surprised, if neocons were heavily involved in this, and if the Trump administration is essentially completely being infiltrated by them to the point where he can't go back and do anything himself.
Yeah, I pretty much think that, well, the recent strike on Syria by the U.S. Navy, well, many people who used to support Trump, who were pro-Russia, genuinely pro-Russia, are now become very disappointed with him, and
Hmm.
myself included. I'm a little bit disappointed. I mean, Trump came to power on this platform of no more interventions, no more wars overseas.
Absolutely.
Let us fix the USA. And now I see this. I was just, what the fuck? Excuse me, my French.
I completely agree, my friend. I mean, I was pretty shocked to see, that he chose the interventionist route, considering the fact that just a day before he was saying that he wouldn't, intervene with the Assad government, and that that he had no interest in removing or replacing Assad, which I completely agree with and support. Um, but I didn't want to jump into any conclusions yesterday. While I did completely disagree with it, I do think that these were kind of some warning shots that were fired, and I'm hopeful and optimistic that this won't lead to any kind of full-scale conflict, essentially. But I mean, we'll have to see, because things there are getting, more and more intense by the day. Personally, I feel that the U.S. has no business in all these other countries. We've seen what's happened in Afghanistan, Libya, and Iraq. So Syria is just a continuation of this process. But hopefully, Trump will be the one that stands up and says that you know we don't need these future wars and we don't need these conflicts right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of Syria, before this war and this revolution, this fuckery started, Syria was a peaceful, somewhat of course not the same life standard as Western Europe, but it was somewhat prosperous and stable country. And
Hmm.
then there's those jihadis and those revolutionaries and those mercenaries from all over the Middle East just flooded Syria, and the war started. And there were, I remember good in back in 2012 how these accusations against Assad, and he people accusing him of atrocities, although I have seen that this was like faked, this was all fake and false propaganda, you know.
Hmm.
And the FSA, the so-called Free Syrian Army, was actually caught faking these atrocities. So this is just another like. Syria was the last the sovereign Middle Eastern country not under the US influence, and it had strong ties with Iran and Russia. Of course, the
Hmm.
US cannot tolerate it.
Of course, I mean, I've spoken to many Syrians here in Canada. Those that emigrated here 20 years ago, and even those that came within the last few years to escape the conflict there. And absolutely, every single one of them has told me that while life under Assad was not absolutely perfect, it was a hell of a lot better than life under these head-chopping ISIS motherfuckers right now. So.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
if we look at pictures of of places like Damascus 20 years ago, it was quite beautiful. It was a city with wonderful architecture, beautiful landscapes, and people, generally seemed pretty happy, and it was very progressive. But I mean, unfortunately, all these countries in the Middle East have met the same fate. The same happened in Libya, the same happened in Iraq. So sadly, this is the fate that they all meet. We fund, not we, but the West funds these terrorist groups that go in there to remove these sovereign governments, or they fund these extremists. This creates a power vacuum. Islamists come in, and then the West comes in screaming democracy, democracy, democracy. We need to remove this dictator. So that's happened over and over and over again, and that's exactly what's happening in Syria right now.
Yeah, well, it's basically similar happened to Ukraine, because you see what the Maidan stood for. It stood for European values, democracy, and to overthrow the corrupt dictator Yanukovych. Although Yanukovych was elected democratically,
Hmm.
I'm not gonna argue with he was pretty corrupt, yes, but that doesn't mean you should overthrow him and completely ruin your country. I know many Ukrainian. I spoke with many Ukrainians online and in real life that saying that under Yanukovych, the life was much better than under this
Hmm.
U.S. controlled puppet government who doesn't really give a fuck about normal Ukrainian people. They only give a fuck about themselves and do what their masters tell them to do. Well, basically, many Ukrainian people who even used to support the Maidan, who were at Maidan in 2013, 2014, they now basically regretting their support.
Of course, and I mean, I'm not surprised, and it's once again, it's quite ironic that during the U.S. elections and after Trump was elected, you had everyone screaming, "Oh well, Russia interfered with our elections. Russia did this. Russia did that. Russia did so and so to infiltrate and influence our elections." Well, what has the U.S. been doing for the last 20 years other than influencing elections all across the world?
Yeah, and they
Uh,
tried
and
to. Oh, sorry.
and it was never peacefully that they were intervening. They were always removing these sovereign governments from power, and like I said, creating these power vacuums or these conflicts through divide and conquer strategies.
Yeah, and they tried to intervene in the Russia's election 2012. I remember
Absolutely.
the Bolotnaya Square protests, and I remember those Russian opposition leaders coming to the U.S. embassy to receive their orders in the U.S. embassy. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, and
Absolutely.
it's just fucking nonsense. Who would believe them? They are They are not sincere patriots of Russia. They are paid traitors. They are fifth column who have agenda of the who have foreign country agenda, foreign
Of
power
course.
agenda. Nobody is gonna elect them. They don't even offer a good program to beat Putin's program or to beat other parties' program. They just, focused on overthrowing Putin and let it be.
No, of course, and I mean, I think this is why Putin sort of implemented, all these laws and regulations around foreign NGOs,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Where they have to, I correct me if I'm wrong, but in Russia they have to register themselves as
yeah. As a
NGOs,
foreign agents.
as a foreign agency, exactly. And this is very smart because I think that these NGOs actually pose the biggest threats to governments worldwide. They disguise themselves as one thing and they spread all kinds of stupid and ridiculous propaganda, and sadly people feed into it. But this is how these interest groups work, and they have millions of dollars behind them, and that's how they slowly infiltrate governments.
Yes, absolutely. And you see, speaking of, also the Russian so-called anti-gay law, even though it is not exactly anti-gay. I mean, you
Hmm.
can be gay, just
Right.
you can be gay. Nobody is going to throw you in jail or in psychiatric hospital for just being gay. But the law actually, people who criticize the law didn't actually read it. the law actually bans only propaganda, promotion of the
Right.
homosexuality to children. I mean, you can still propagate it to adults and nothing's gonna happen to you.
Hmm.
Well, you can't have gay prides because you see, we in Russia are very, you see, very traditionalist, and many of us just don't like homosexuality when it's been shoved in our faces and down our throats. Of course, we're going to resist it, and sometimes violently. Well, but basically, the average Russian mentality is okay, be gay, but just shut the fuck up about it, and don't shove your sexuality in my face, and I won't shove my fists in yours.
Absolutely. I mean, I completely agree, and it's the same scenario in my country, in Serbia. Uh, I mean, we hold on to our traditional values, and yes, it's okay to be gay, this and that, but just don't shove it down my throat. Don't come and tell my children that they need to be in this and this way, especially younger children who are impressionable. So I'm actually very happy that regulation and those laws exist in Russia, because I think that children up until a certain age are the most vulnerable, and you are the most susceptible to this kind of propaganda. And while we're on the subject of the LGBT and all of this, it's
Yeah,
funny because back in 2010 during the Vancouver Olympics, many Vancouver clubs and bars were actually trying to boycott different brands of Russian vodka, because they didn't support Putin's anti-gay propaganda. So I found this very funny, that they were doing this whole hissy fit about something as simple as gay propaganda and banning Russian athletes, when there were much bigger issues at the time.
yeah, and the same thing actually happened during the Sochi Winter Olympics, and well, and the Pussy Riot provocation.
Yes.
I actually enjoyed the video where they were whipped by the Cossacks. I mean, the Cossacks just that was awesome, man.
Yes. Yes, I remember this.
That was
I remember
top
this.
cack. So okay, yeah, and there was another video with Pussy Riot being attacked with a green antiseptic in McDonald's. And
I
after,
remember.
yeah, and after that they decided to move to the United States, and actually they recorded a song about Trump and anti-Trump song. They made a video clip about it. Haven't you seen that? No.
No, it doesn't sound familiar.
That's fucking. They just can't stop. But another funny thing is, when Pussy Riots start to show up on the protests in the U.S., the U.S. authorities actually didn't actually approve of it. They say you can go. You see, this is the double standard. You can go on protests in Russia wherever do you want, but in the U.S., no, no, no.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, of course, because they're Russian, right? If it was anyone else, they would have said, "Hey, come here, join this and this NGO. Let's go ruin Russia."
Yeah, basically, and this guy the opposition politician who got shot, that is Nemtsov guy, Boris Nemtsov,
Yes, yes.
before even investigation could begin, the media blamed Putin just right away. It's Putin, Putin, Putin. They didn't even start. Investigation hasn't even started, and the Malaysian plane MH17 investigation. The next day, Putin and pro-Russia and Russian and the pro-Russia rebels in Ukraine, they were blamed right away. I mean,
Hmm.
what the
Of
fuck?
course.
No evidence. I think the anti-Russian bias is so strong. No evidence. No evidence even required. If it's something bad and it's somehow related to Russia, yeah, that's true. No evidence required. Don't you think so? It seems so this way.
Absolutely, absolutely, and this is what this all started. The anti-Russian propaganda really sort of intensified. During the time that the entire Ukrainian conflict was escalating. So from then on, it's just been accusation after accusation, and it's just been an absolute blame game from the side of the West. But this was flying at one point, But as you know, the Trump campaign and as Trump gained momentum, I think people here in the West, especially, started to sort of see through the bullshit. And a lot of people now here actually really like and support Russia, and they really respect it as the bear and as this counterbalance of power. So I think the tides are slowly changing. People here are slowly waking up as well, and really people are seeing through the bullshit of mainstream news such as CNN that's pushing this propaganda. And that's why these channels are losing so many viewers and more people are going to places like RT and alternative news.
Yeah, and including YouTube and alternative media. Yeah,
Definitely.
so basically, you see, and the historical revisionism. I mean, it's so taboo to be historical revisionist on the World War II, on the Holocaust, and all other stuff. And it seems you can't criticize Jews at all. I mean,
Hmm.
recently the girl I interviewed, Evalion. Maybe you heard about her.
I saw. Yes, I saw that you did the video. I didn't get the chance to watch it. I definitely will, but I saw that you interviewed her.
Well, she's being like called like the most racist girl on YouTube. Although all she did is just make a bunch of YouTube videos. She didn't hurt anyone. She didn't attack anyone. Just made a bunch of YouTube videos and became viral, and that's all she did.
Right, right. Well, that's the problem today is that we're part of this oversensitive, over politically correct snowflake crybaby generation where basically anything you say can trigger someone and make someone cry and hurt someone, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, our grandparents were on the battlefields in World War I and World War II, shooting guns at a very young age, seeing all these horrific things, and here we have these little millennials who are absolutely entitled, whining and crying about the smallest things. And that's a problem, because if we're not able to express our opinions freely, then we're in fact the ones that are propagating the very things that we're fighting against, which is this fascism and censorship that we've always been trying to get away from.
Yeah, but this now it's called liberal fascism and liberal
Hmm.
censorship. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and it's actually well, people always when they hear the word Nazi or right wing, they imagine this like violent skinheads, but it's actually now quite reverse. That right wing and Trump supporters, they are not violent. It's the Antifa and the left wing and
Hmm.
the social justice warriors. They are violent.
Definitely, and I believe it was someone like Winston Churchill or someone who had a really good quote about this, that the fascists of the future are going to be those that are against fascism.
Those who
Something.
call themselves anti-fascists. Yeah,
That's it, my friend.
yeah, yeah.
um, that's a really good quote. My favorite quote, actually, and it's absolutely true, because as we're seeing today, and as I've witnessed at all of these protests, as soon as you have an opinion that is contradictory to the narrative of these people, mainly these liberals, right away you're going to be labeled a fascist, a Nazi, a white supremacist, a bigot, or a racist. And by putting these very cheap and shallow labels on you, what they're doing is actually completely censoring you and leaving no room for you to speak, or no room for any kind of discussion and discourse.
Yeah, absolutely. You see, I'm also a military guy, a military enthusiast, and I'm more interested in tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, armored fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers. My knowledge about aircraft is pretty limited, and I absolutely know jack shit about vessels and submarines. So, and what about you? Are you interested in military equipment?
You know what? I can't say that I am. I should be. I should be, because I definitely support the military. And it's actually kind of pathetic that my knowledge on this issue is so shallow. And I did, see some of your videos where you were talking about the various tanks and the comparisons of the tanks.
Yeah,
So this is great. I think we need more of this because we've sort of forgotten about all these great technologies. And I definitely feel that that's something I need to educate myself on. I
yeah.
feel like a pussy.
Yeah, you see, the social justice warriors and the liberals, they say that military build-up is fascism, and all kind of patriotism and nationalism and military build-up. They immediately equate it to fascism. I mean, what the fuck? Why are they so pussified?
Well, because I guess in their world, words are weapons, right? So if words are already weapons, and if words can harm and trigger and make people cry, then something like bullets or weapons for defense and these things are out of this world. They're absolutely unacceptable. This and that, right?
Yeah,
it doesn't even exist as a concept in their head. So and I mean, these are the same people, that that will feel entitled. They will want this and that, but they'll forget that their grandparents probably fought
a
and,
war.
and died in wars to be able to protect the borders that they're living within, right? So they take a lot of things for granted. They forget a lot of things, but yeah, it's quite sad.
Yeah, and you see, especially like, especially feminists. And by the way, speaking of feminism, I think feminism has become absolutely fucked up, and you see these batshit crazy feminists who say kill all men and men's
Mm.
issues don't matter, and Pussy Riot are one of those, and the female group in Europe and in the US. Basically, feminism today has absolutely discredited itself.
Absolutely. I mean, feminism from the start was about equality between men and women during the first and second waves. But this third wave, I believe, has been completely reversed, and it's now about inferiority, making men feel inferior. Uh, you know, uh, Putting women here and basically bringing men down to here, right? Which is not what feminism was ever about. And I believe that it's been infiltrated by various schools of thought that I'm sure you're familiar with yourself.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's crazy. These radical feminists, know the things that they believe, and to what lengths they'll go to bash men, and to what lengths they'll go to even lie about things like rape.
Yeah, absolutely. Lie to gain victim status. You see, there is another fucked up, very fucked up thing is victimhood culture and victimhood
Yes,
complex. Yeah,
yes.
when you're a victim, you feel everybody. When a victim is a victim, everybody feels empathy for the victim, and everybody is trying. Oh, poor you. Let me hug you or something like that. You see, but with the sense of victimhood comes sense of entitlement. I mean, if including the Black Lives Matter and the rapper, actually today black people, some of the racist black people, actually demand reparations from white people for slavery. But come on,
Hmm.
you were born like 20 or 30 years ago. You were never a slave. So what the fuck? Why are you and those white people around you never owned slaves? So what the fuck is this about? You know, you see, and I can say the same about the Russians and about the Russian patriotic circles. None of the Russian patriots or Russian nationalists has ever said, Germany did kill a lot of Russians during the World War II or and the Great Patriotic War. So why don't we demand reparations from modern Germans? Like, I mean, it's stupid.
Of course. Of course, it's absolutely an era where victimhood is being completely exploited on all ends. Back in the day, rising out of a conflict, falling down and getting back up on your feet used to be respectable. But now, it's basically a contest of who can be the bigger pussy, right? And sadly, we're breeding this generation of pussies now, where everyone is trying to address these issues through through victimization and playing victim, instead of trying to rise above it all and saying, hey, I'm going to be the stronger person, I'm going to rise above this, and try to fix things through strength instead of trying to fix things through weakness.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree, because you see, I feel that Russia is a strong, is a player. It's not a victim. Russia is what, because Russia is a player, and
Absolutely.
you see, there is these countries around, like the Baltic states. They also play this, and play this victimhood and Russia hysteria, and
Hmm.
they say that, oh, Russia is about to invade. Russia is about to invade. We are so small, so tiny. Please, NATO, help us. Russia is about to invade. And the citizens of the Baltic states, they are being bombarded with this propaganda of big bad Russia, which is about to invade them. And basically, it's not the ordinary people of the Baltic states, but the politicians. However, there are a lot of brainwashed people also among the ordinary people, people
Hmm.
who are gullible and who easily believe the media.
Hmm.
But I think that their propaganda is failing, and I actually think that Europe is waking up, will wake it is waking up. I mean, I actually think that Marine Le Pen has great chances of being next president of France.
Absolutely, I agree. I think that Western Europe is getting sick of all the problems that it's being plagued with. As you're seeing, we now have two terrorist attacks happening on a weekly basis,
Yeah,
and we're no longer even shocked by it. We just treat it as a daily occurrence, and we go on with our days. That's how rampant and common it's become. So I think that eventually, uh, Western European countries will have to stop being the victims, of their own political systems and of their own politicians, and will have to stand up and fight against the problems that are facing them, because otherwise they'll be overrun and eventually wiped out. As sad as it is to say.
yeah, and I hope the alternative for Germany will win, and maybe German National Democratic Party. So basically,
Definitely.
after the Brexit, I mean, the Europe, well, both the election of Trump and the Brexit, this was basically, I think, it was a big fu to the system.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was a big fu to the system, and it showed, that the average man, the common, the common person in England, it really showed how they felt, right?
Yeah,
It showed that they were sick of the EU, that they were sick of Merkel, that they were sick of Germany's influence on their country, and this is a movement that we're seeing all across the Western world. It's these sort of nationalist springs that we're seeing. People are sick of globalist governments and globalist agendas, and
yeah,
they're starting to take their nations back. And this is why all of a sudden, being a nationalist, being a patriot, or anything is being being compared to being a Nazi. They're attaching these negative labels
yeah,
to something completely normal. People are sick of globalists. They want their countries, their borders, and their economies back.
yeah.
And the globalists are shitting their pants because of this. So now they're trying to play this whole, nationalist Nazi blame game.
Yeah, and absolutely. And some people trying to prove wrong, including some individuals on the alternative media. But I think, and I keep on thinking that Russia
Hmm.
is probably the last bastion of anti-globalism. Well, to some extent, China too, but China
Hmm.
is also very, some sort of in bed with the globalists on many like issues, or maybe they're just way too careful and don't want an overt confrontation. I don't know, but still, I think Russia is one of the only, or if not the only, country who is resisting and who is capable of beating, beat the globalists back. But you see, there is including inside Russia, there is this globalist fifth column and sixth column, and Putin is actually fighting a hard battle, and I wish him luck. And I think the next presidential election, 2018 Russia presidential elections, I hope he will win again and he will continue the fight. Or if he doesn't win, or if he just want to run for office in 2018, I hope that he will present as a successor that will continue his policies, because I noticed this, that in Russian history, after a strong ruler, weak ruler comes, such as basically, if you think about Mikhail Gorbachev,
Mhm.
to the West, he's actually like a hero, like some sort of a good guy in the evil Soviet Union. But to many Russians and to many Russian patriots and to many like patriotic communists, he's a fucking traitor who sold the country, who sold the USSR down, who who sold out the USSR as a great power. Well,
Absolutely. I actually I have to. I'm gonna leave you in a few minutes, but I'll just stand off by saying this. I completely agree. I mean, even Boris Yeltsin, I think, was an absolute shit president
yes,
in Russia, and after him, change needed to happen, and luckily it happened for the good. Putin came
yeah,
in. Um, but the way I see it, and I absolutely agree, Russia is this last counterbalance and counterforce to Western hegemony and globalism as a whole. And that ties into everything that we talked about earlier regarding, anti-Russian propaganda and this whole movement to demonize Russia, because that's the only way that the globalists can succeed. It's by weakening Russia from all sides, infiltrating it, through various organizations and various geopolitical tactics, and breaking it down from within, essentially, right?
yeah,
But and I mean, they're sort of running around now, scratching their heads because they're seeing that it's not working, their agenda isn't being fulfilled, and pardon me, they're absolutely terrified. So that's why they're going harder and harder every single day on every single
issue.
front, trying to destroy and discredit Russia.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. And not just they just attacking on all sides, from within, and through they trying to destabilize Russia through NGOs and the color revolutions, and from and externally from the outside, they're moving NATO troops closer and closer to Russian borders, such as to NATO troops were deployed in Poland and in Baltic states. This is very
Yes.
close. This is dangerously close to Russia's borders. And then, of course, as a retaliation, our military command sent Iskander M ballistic missile systems to Kaliningrad, the only Russian enclave in the West. And once these missiles were deployed to Kaliningrad, the Western presses, the lying presses, oh my God, Russia is preparing an aggression. Oh,
Yep.
stop those evil Russians. What, for fuck's sakes? If you haven't deployed the troops in the Poland and in Baltic states, none of this would have happened. It's just a Russia's response, a retaliation for your aggressive movement, aggressive deployment in dangerous proximity to our borders.
Absolutely. So as a closing statement, I'll just say, because I really
Okay.
have to I really have to
Yeah.
go.
Okay. Okay.
I completely agree. I mean, the NATO has troops in all the Baltic countries. They have troops performing drills on a daily basis in all these places. Right next to Russia's border, and this is all on purpose. These are just provocation tactics to see how Russia will respond. And Russia's been great so far. I mean, they've really chosen the peaceful route in terms of how they're handling these situations. But as you see, I mean, look what's going down in Serbia. Serbia and Russia have always been very tight
Yeah.
allies. But you have NATO troops running through Serbia. You have globalist puppet governments in Serbia, Western NGOs in Serbia. So I mean, it's they're attacking Russia on every front, but they're also attacking its allies, trying to break them down and just weaken this side of the world, essentially, piece by piece.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's now time to wrap this up, and I gotta say this was a great interview. It's been a great pleasure to have you on my channel, and it's been over 50 minutes. Yeah, that's quite a short time. So yeah, it's great to have you here. So yeah, bye. Stay positive, stay thinking, keep on doubting, stay sane, as one of the racist girls says. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah,
Abs-
stay cheeky breaky. Bye.
abs- Absolutely, stay cheeky breaky, my friend, and I
Yeah,
thank you very much for having me on my channel. I look forward to all your videos and
yeah,
obviously any future interviews and great discussions that we'll have.
yeah. Bye.
До
До
свидания.
свидания.